Hey everybody, Nito. I'm gonna give a bit of a content warning. We're gonna get into some kind of heavy stuff today. A lot of it revolving around depression, abuse, other kinds of things. If you're squeamish to that kind of thing, maybe catch the next video. I'm also gonna make a disclaimer here that at the end of this video, I'm going to be giving more information about it, but I am launching my Patreon with this video. And I'm mentioning it now, so it doesn't come off as a guilt trip. This is mostly just an explanation for why I want to do what I want to do with, my career, and I don't want it to come off as a guilt trip in any way. So I'm mentioning it now that I am launching my Patreon. It is in the description. I will go over it in more detail at the end of the video if you actually want more detail. For now, let's get into it. One of the things that I constantly heard growing up was this story. I mean, true story. I believe it, but because of the kind of person I am. But I would constantly hear about how when I was just, I want to say like maybe less than a year old. Like somewhere between 10 to 15 months old, somewhere around there, where I was at a diner with my grandparents and I pointed to an exit sign and said exit, and that was my first word. I heard this story a lot because my grandmother would always use this as a excuse to always be like, oh, you're so smart, you're a prodigy because you spoke so early, and etc. That was further exemplified when I was diagnosed with hyperlexia at a very young age. Hyperlexia is a disorder off the autistic spectrum, usually taking a little bit more of a mild. The symptoms for it are a lot more mild than your more extreme cases of like autism, but you can still go on to lead a very normal life. But my grandmother saw this as like a superpower. She thought this made me a genius and so smart. But it's something that I struggle to live with even today. Not that she would ever want to hear that. My mom and my dad had me when they were around 18 years old. I was kind of a happy accident. Just kind of how it is. I was unplanned. This was something that fucked me up for years, but it doesn't really bother me as much anymore. I would get really fixated on things for like long amounts of time. Like the first video game that I ever played was Pokemon, and for a good solid like 3 to 4 years, Pokemon was my life. Like those games like were everything to me. I loved them so much. My grandmother thought it was the most amazing thing that I could hear a sound of someone playing Pokemon across the room and know what Pokemon it was at like 5 or 6 years old. And she just thought it was the most amazing thing. Anything I did as a little kid was like held up to the highest standard possible. Like I was just this prodigy. I was flawless. I was so well behaved, all this other stuff. The problem is that puts pressure on you when your guardians, parents, whatever, do this, where they put this pressure on you to keep that, you're a genius, you gotta keep doing all this stuff. And well, if you fail, then you're messing up. You got to do better. That pressure was like so much. It was never not present once I was no longer a little kid. I was in a kind of special ed program when I was a kid, where this was like the only time I ever really attended a public school for like actual school things. It was a program. I went there and basically just, from what I remember, I just fucked around for like 4 hours or whatever. And just messed around in school, in that school. I didn't really learn anything. I don't remember much about it because, I was 4 to 5 years old at the time. I know what school it was in, where it was in the school, but like, I don't remember much outside of that. And then after that, I never set foot in a public school for school itself again, or a private school. I was homeschooled from grade 1 until my senior year of high school. Except for like kind of a couple years I was in this homeschool program for like 2 years. But my grandmother didn't really take it seriously, and neither did I as an extension, because I do remember one thing, and this is kind of like leading into why I have so much mental trauma from like being raised the way I did. I have always been a huge fan of music. Just always. Always have been, always will be. If, I will listen to just about any music. I love music. It's like a gateway to another world for me. Whenever I put it on, I just kind of drift off to another world for a bit if like the song catches me in the right mood. If it's a song I really, really like, it just like, I'm not even on planet Earth anymore when I'm listening to music sometimes. When I was in that middle school program, I got an iPod Nano, and I just had it filled with all my favorite music. I loved that iPod so much. I would save up so much money just to go buy iTunes gift cards and put music on the Nano. Like, I loved all that music so much. And in this middle school program, there was actually someone who bullied me, and they stole my iPod. To this day, I know they stole my iPod. They stole my iPod and they sold it. It's so obvious to me to this day that he took it, and, he never got caught. I got in trouble for that because I wasn't supposed to have the iPod at school. I wasn't supposed to have the iPod with me. It was never supposed to leave the house, even though it's a portable music player. And there was no way I was going to get away with it listening during class. I was just going to listen to music while on lunch or whatever, because that's what I did. I didn't have many friends at that place. I had 2 at most. And even then, I wasn't allowed to sit next to either of them because I couldn't stop talking to them because they were the only people that ever seemed to give a shit about me at that place. But, I got an absolute lashing physically and mentally that night because, I took the iPod with me and it got stolen, and therefore that was my fault. And that's the kind of shit I had to deal with growing up. There's so many instances where I had to fess up to things that I never actually did because my grandmother was just so convinced that I did them. I remember there was this time where, a trial ran out on a game on the computer, and she blamed me for it, even though I didn't touch the computer that day. I never touched it. She blamed me for it, closing, and now she can't play the game that she had a free trial on. She doesn't want to pay for the full thing. So she blamed it on me, and she told me to go in my room until I told her the truth. And I never came out of the room for the rest of the day, and I got grounded for that. I was like, okay, I didn't do anything wrong. So many instances like that. She was physically abusive towards me, and even more mentally abusive. Just so much shit like that all the time growing up. All the pressure to be the kid that I was when I was young, to be the prodigy she knows I am. When in actuality, I have a learning disability. I've always had one. It's really, really hard for me to focus. I can't sit and learn things because it's hard. It's hard for me to keep attention. I'm almost positive that I have ADHD and some form of Asperger's, and I never, ever, ever, ever got diagnosed for it because my grandmother didn't want to hear it. There was someone she knew that was part of our 4-H club, which, she was a leader for 4-H club because someone like that deserves to work with kids. There was someone that was in her 4-H club that had Asperger's, a very severe case of it, and she just will always associate Asperger's with that individual, and she's just like, no, there's no way he has it. Even though, I have so many of the symptoms. I have so many of the symptoms of ADHD, anxiety, bipolar disorder. I was super depressed, as early as, 8 or 9 years old. And the most prevalent time of it rearing its head was around Christmas time, because I hated Christmas so much as a kid. Because it was never, ever, ever fun or enjoyable in any capacity. It was never enjoyable. One of the main reasons for this is my grandmother is a hoarder. She can't let stuff go. She piles things to the ceiling, and of course, in typical, psychopathic behavior, she blames everyone for it. Blames everyone but herself. It's always someone else's fault. She never wants to take responsibility for anything. I'd get, screamed at and woken up at, midnight because something got knocked over that meant a lot to her, and now everyone in the house has to help her clean. Right now. There's so much shit like that that was growing up, and for the longest time, that shit was just normal to me. I just accepted it. But after some time, I realized this isn't healthy. I think it was mostly because somewhere along the line, my mom became a more prevalent figure in my life. She and I started to establish a bit more of a relationship, and now my mom and I are really close. I love my mom. I love my mom to death. She did her best with the situation she was given. Obviously, she made some mistakes here and there, but, what parent doesn't make mistakes? She was more of a parent than my grandmother ever was. Because she was actually there for me when I needed her to be. All of this, like, mental lashing that I would always get from, or this verbal lashing, that's the term I want to use. All this verbal lashing I would get from my grandmother growing up. She would just go for the lowest of blows. And one time I wanted to, like, talk to her about it, because I'm just like, I don't like the way this makes me feel. This isn't healthy. I want us to, like, work this out. And, like, I sent her an email in my own passive-aggressive way because, like, I'm completely socially inept because I've never set foot in a public school. I have no social skills whatsoever. I'm, like, 9 years old at a computer. What the hell am I supposed to do? So I, like, sent her an email from my own email account, and she promptly tells me to get in the car with her, and we drive off. Sorry, this is kind of hard to talk about. We're driving down the road, and she swerves into the other lane for a bit, and there's another car coming, and she says, "Say you're sorry, say you're sorry." She starts screaming at me, "Say you're sorry." You know, and I, you know, of course I start screaming, I'm sorry, and she swerves back into the other lane. And, you know, she's just like, "I should ship you off to your mother, Aunt Kathy and Uncle Jason. You should just leave. I don't want you here anymore." I was just like, I just wanted to talk. And, you know, she just screamed at me for like 2 hours in the car. How dare I be so ungrateful? How dare I try to tell her that she's making mistakes? How dare I try to talk to her? And, you know, threatened to kill me effectively because I wanted my life situation to be a little better. There's a lot of instances like that. And of course, you know, because of all this shit, I started getting depressed and suicidal because I was just like, I want a way out of this. And it got even worse as I grew up because the further and further we get along in school, the more I'm realizing that, like, she is beyond sabotaging my education. Because she wasn't sending it into the school board. She never did. Except for the one time where, like, I went and got my learner's permit, and then, like, the school board was like, "Hey, we never seen any work from you in, like, a few years. What's going on with this?" So we had to, like, gather a bunch of stuff to show that, like, we're doing work and all this stuff. And they just kind of said, okay. And that was the only time that we ever had to send in work because we had to go in for a thing. And then after that, never again. Great job, Maryland School Board. Thank you. But I just kept realizing that, like, she's doing this in a way that was almost like evil mastermind levels of genius. She would put me in full control of how much school I would go through. And if I got distracted, which I did because, you know, I can't focus because I've got an undiagnosed case of ADHD. I can't fucking focus on school when there's, like, so many things around me that I can go and do. And she never properly restrained any of it. She always would just be like, "Oh, it's your fault. It's your fault that you're falling behind. It's your fault that you're behind. You're gonna have to work through you're gonna have to do school through the summer. You're gonna have to do this. You're gonna do that." I never once experienced a summer vacation. Never once. Because I was always behind. Eventually, somewhere along the way, I realized just how fucked all of this is. Like, literally how fucked all of this is. So, in order to get her off my case so that I could just, like, make it by until I was 18 and get the hell out of there, I started cheating. I would take pictures, because I remember exactly. I would take pictures with this, like, little point-and-shoot camera. I would take pictures of the answers of everything, and then would protect that SD card with my life. And I would just copy the answers down while she wasn't looking. And she had the stuff all locked away. Like, she knew I was doing it. She knew I was cheating, but she could never figure out how. She never was able to, like, put the pieces together how I was doing it. Like, she took my phone multiple times. I had an iPod Touch that had a camera on it. She took that away multiple times and would look through the pictures on it. She could never see that. She knew I was doing it somehow, but she never could figure it out. Eventually, I just made it. I managed until I was, like, 18. And then, like, somewhere between 18 and 19 years old, I went and took the GED test. on my GED, I got perfect scores on my English and writing segments. My math segment, I almost flubbed entirely, and then history or whatever, I like kind of got an okay grade. I got like a certificate of excellence for my GED because, you know, I perfected 2 portions of it. I think I even wrote about fandom stuff in my GED, which is really cringy to think about, but hey, I mean, it got me a perfect grade, so whatever. But because of all this, because of it being my fault that I was falling behind and everything else, I started to doubt myself. I started to have crippling self-esteem issues, which I still deal with to this day, because I was always told that I was not the person that she knew I was growing up all the time. She would constantly compare me to her actual son, my uncle, and she would constantly call me by his name by complete accident, because I looked like him, which I don't. I don't look like him in any capacity. I don't look like my uncle. Not at all. I look like my dad. You know, that's all she ever saw. She didn't see me for who I was. She saw my uncle. But I wasn't living up to his standards, so I was a failure in her eyes. I was always a failure in her eyes. I only was able to do the stuff she approved of. I was only able to be friends with people she approved of, and even then, like, my best friends growing up, she never liked. She never liked them because they didn't like her. They didn't want to be around her, and I would go hang out with them at their house, but never at our house, because our house was always a fucking mess. I could never have friends over, because I couldn't. There's no way for me to. The friends I did have, you know, I feel like they only hung out with me. A couple of them I still talk to today, but like most of them, I feel like they only hung out with me because our parents approved of each other, or my grandparents and their parents approved of each other, so I could go hang out with them. When reality is, I don't know if they ever really liked me at all. When I started video editing as like 15 years old, started making AMVs, my grandmother shot it down at like every turn. She deleted my YouTube channel twice. She'd constantly take my stuff away because it's just like, oh, it's illegal. You can't do this. She would always despise any amount of editing time I ever did. She was just like, no, this is a waste of your time. You should get a real thing. You should like get back into horticulture like your uncle and be an architect. I hated horticulture so much. I hated it. It was boring. All I did was look at plants and tell people what they were. And like, I was only right like 65% of the time. But I was really good at it as a little kid, so therefore, you know, I could never get away from it. There was one thing that my grandmother did approve of that I did enjoy, which was public speaking. And, you know, surprise that carries over to today. I remember finally telling her, no, I'm taking full control of this speech this time. I would always write a speech, and she would just tweak it because, you know, she was better at English than I was, which is bullshit, by the way. And she would just make it so it didn't sound like me anymore. It sounded like her. It sounded like she wrote it, and I'm just speaking it. That was the kind of stuff that I would deal with all the time growing up. Is like, I would do a thing, and then she would revise it to the point where it was her work now, but, you know, I got to pass it off as mine. So many times. But I remember the final year, like, it's like junior, intermediate, senior in 4-H. You know, junior is like elementary school, intermediate is middle school, senior is high school. The final year, me being a senior in 4-H, I said, hey, let me write the speech. Let me do all of this by myself this time. She says, are you sure? She's like, I could always help. I was like, no, I'm confident I got it this time. And I won the state championship that year. Completely. I swept the floor with everybody. Like, I've talked to the judges afterwards, and they were like, that was the easiest decision we've had for a state champion ever. And it was really funny because, like, they asked me at the, like, before the awards ceremony, they asked me to perform the speech at the thing because they loved it. They loved it so much they wanted to hear it, and it was a speech about voice acting, which, in retrospect, I got so much information wrong, but it was me. It was finally me. I was finally starting to carve out a personality for myself. I wasn't just a shadow of my grandmother. You know, I was finally becoming my own person. And I'll never remember how much I cried and how much I couldn't stop crying when I won that award. Because it didn't matter who else was proud of me at the time. I was happy with myself for once. I was proud of myself for once. And I wound up like going on a national trip and making some lifelong friends because of that trip. I don't talk to them like regularly, but like they're people that I'm always going to remember. I'm always going to have fond memories of, you know, because I got to travel, or not even halfway across the country. I got to travel to like Atlanta. I'll never forget it. I will never forget that. In a million years, I will never forget that. That is like one of the like highlights of my childhood. And it was because of the hard work I put in. I didn't get a college sponsorship from that. So unlike my uncle who did when he went to the national like horticulture competition, and I'm like, okay, whatever. And it was never good enough for her. Even like as an adult, when I was like talking about like, as a kid, I loved the Guitar Hero so much. I would play it all the time. And then like, you know, I lost all the peripherals and stuff when I moved out here. And this was back when I used to actually talk to my grandmother. You know, when I came out here, you know, I got a kick to play Clone Hero after I realized it was a thing, and I got the peripherals and was talking to, and then I like talked to her about it. I was like, I'm playing Guitar Hero again. It's so cool. And she's like, yeah, I wish you would play drums again though. And it's shit like that. It's just like, it's never enough for you. I went to Pound 2016, a Smash tournament, and put in so much work and got top 96 out of 600 some odd people. And I was the happiest I'd ever been while playing Smash. And my grandmother's just like, well, yeah, but what did you really accomplish? And it was never enough. Because, you know, how dare I not focus on school and do the things that I want to do when you gave me free reign to do the things that I want to do? And, you know, didn't parent at all. I'm getting really off track. I was, you know, suicidal. I was for a very, 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 very long time. I still struggle with depression a little bit, but not the suicidal part as much anymore, thank God. For a very, very long time. And you know what she did? I'll never forgive her for this. I never, ever will forgive her for this. She said, oh, you want to kill yourself so bad, then just do it. Just do it. To a depressed teenager. Who now I know has bipolar. It has bipolar disorder. Because it runs in my family. I will never forgive her for that. In a million years. Eventually, it got to the point where, like, I finally just put my foot down and said, enough is enough, and I'm done, and cut all ties with my grandmother, and I can't really say that I regret it. You know, I had like a template here to like help me like stay on track, but it's just kind of become a ramble fest about my childhood and how fucked up it was. The reason that I'm talking about all this is that consistently, the whole time, and even in the public speaking thing, my favorite thing is to make people laugh, happy, whatever, entertain. As early as like 15 years old, I knew that my calling was entertainment in some degree. Because that's what I like doing. I like giving people short respite from, you know, the bullshit they have to deal with from day-to-day life. I like making people forget about it all for a little bit and smile and laugh and enjoy themselves and think, you know, and feel good, feel better about themselves. You know, when I was making music videos as a teenager, I didn't have that much outreach, but, you know, I loved creating and I loved the positive feedback. I loved hearing people go, oh, that was awesome. I loved watching that. I always say that, like, don't do what you do for fame or whatever, but holy fuck, does people saying nice things about the stuff you make feel great. But the thing is that I didn't quite realize that it was entertainment. I thought my passion was video editing, which I can't even do anymore because of years of not being treated right in my own creative department. In my own creative outlet, it just, editing was always seen as a throwaway skill. Like, oh, that's something anyone can do. Which, by the way, no, it's not true. Not everyone can do it. I can't do it anymore. The most editing you will see is just like basic little editing here and there. I loved it for a very, very long time. It was something that I really, really loved doing. And it, you know, it sucks that I burnt out so hard on it, but I don't even think it's burnout. Like, I want to do it. I want to edit, but I can't. Like, every time I sit down, it just makes me miserable if I sit down and, like, try to make, like, a music video. You know, I can't do it anymore. It just, physically makes, it makes me sad. So, for a long time, I didn't have direction. I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. I just kind of lived in the moment, you know. I had, like, my grandmother took all the money that I would make from entering in the state fair, right? She took all that money and put it in a savings account, right? And then I, later on, took that money, because it was my money, took that money and spent it on cross-country trips for My Little Pony conventions. Because I wasn't going to use it for college. It was $2,000. I wasn't even going to pay for one semester. What the fuck was I going to do with that, right? You know? I at that point had just assumed that I was just going to be stuck in Maryland forever and I was never going to get out of there, so what the hell? I don't regret that, by the way. That was one of the best, like, couple of weeks of my life. I don't regret that at all. I made some lifelong friends that I still talk to this day from doing that. And I did it twice. I did it a second time. I didn't have to use the savings for the second time because I had a job then, but, you know, I still did it. It was still something that I enjoyed doing. So I guess that circles back around to, you know, why tell us all about this? Why tell us your life story? And the reason for that is that I have poured my heart and soul into everything I do for content creation for like over a decade now. I'm 27. I started this journey when I was 15. I'm married now because of it to some degree. I mean, I literally proposed to my fiance or my husband with a music video at a PMV contest in BrodyCon. Through all of that, I can finally now say that I am happy with who I am and I'm happy with where I am in life. But I want to do this full time. I've, within the past year, have tried so many different jobs. So many. Warehouse, medical assembly, bakery, retail, customer service, IT, so many different job avenues. None of them is stuck. It's always come down to the same thing of the pressure of it, kind of just like, it weighs down on me a lot, and then I crack, and I break, and I can't handle it. I always just feel like I'm not doing what I should be doing. Whenever I'm doing that, it's always just like, it's a placeholder. It's just something that I'm doing until I'm able to do the thing that I actually want to do again. I understand that like many, many other people are just like, oh, that's just how life is. But as you can tell, my life has been anything but normal. I don't want to just work a 9-to-5 and then do content creation on the outside because I feel like I'm not doing what I should be doing. I'm not doing the thing that I feel like I was put on this earth to do, which is to make other people's lives better through creation and doing other things. So that's why I stream. That's why I make content on YouTube again after like taking like a 1.5 year hiatus. That's good to be back. It's good to be back making content. And I'm glad that I sat down and talked about all this because I'm just even more motivated. I'm more motivated to make this work. I'm more motivated to make this my career because that's what I want. That's what I want this to be. This is my passion. It's forever going to be my passion. And if I'm not passionate about something, I can't do it. That's just kind of how I operate. So, that being said, like I mentioned with the disclaimer beforehand, I'm launching my Patreon today. Here's the thing. I want this to be as affordable for people as they want it to be. So I have my most expensive tier, it's $25. But every single one of them, you get credits and you get credits in every video, you get Patreon exclusive posts, all this other stuff. And then $5 up, we have VR chat meetups and other stuff. You can see more information on the Patreon page itself, but if you do want to support me and what I'm doing here, then, you know, it's right there. That's up to you, though. And I want to be clear that I do not want this video to come off as guilt tripping. If you cannot reasonably donate, then don't. I don't want you to put yourself at risk and spend money you don't have. I don't want this to ever be like that. But what I will say is that, you know, I will be forever grateful if you do. Because this is what makes me happy. This is what I want to do with my life, is make content for the people that I care about, which is you guys, every single one of you. I'm sorry for this lengthy, kind of unconstructed ramble. I wasn't expecting it to go on this long. I don't really have much else to add. Patreon link is down in the description. you want to donate, please do. If you don't, if you can't or don't want to, that's also fine. I'm perfectly fine with that. All I really have to say is thank you for your time. Thank you for listening to me. Thank you for listening to my story and why I do what I do. Because despite everything that I've been through, I still want to make the world a better place by making content and, you know, just trying to be a bright spot in people's day. So, I don't really have anything else to add. Thank you for your time. You have a good one. Stay dirty.